What is neuro-linguistic programming? Well, it's not just the words that you use. It's not just your body language. It's a tool for everyday life, for helping you navigate difficult conversations. It's about helping you be a better marketer or a better sales professional. It's about helping other people in their lives overcome their own obstacles. It's about helping them get from A to B. Jason Barrett is an expert in neuro-linguistic programming. He's a great guy. We had a lot of fun. Enjoy. If you run your own business, it kind of helps if you can be a little bit more persuasive at times. It might be you need to manage and motivate your staff. It might be that you need to bring family members on side or on board to help them see the vision that you see. And of course, being persuasive is also very helpful when it comes to selling. Now, to help me out today, to dig a little bit deeper into this topic of persuasion, I have with me Jason Barrett, who is an NLP mentor and coach, and he's been doing this for 9 years. He's head of programs at Wild Success. You might have heard of Wild Success. It was founded by a guy called Calvin Coyles, and Jason works alongside Calvin. And just for fun, I recently discovered that Jason is a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, to such an extent that you have Elvish tattooed on your body or something random?
That is correct.
What does it say in Elvish?
So it actually links the two quite well. So when learning NLP with Calvin, one of the things that we spoke about was the idea of being a warrior of light. And that's an old legend where 10,000 warriors of light would descend from the heavens and teach the teachers. It's an old Hawaiian, Hopi legend, right? And Calvin has that tattooed on his forearm, and my brother Kim, who you know and the audience might know quite well, Kim Barrett, has it tattooed on his arm in English, and Calvin has it in Sanskrit. I was like, oh, it'd be cool to get it in a third language. So it says "Warrior of Light" in Elvish on my ribs, and good thing elves don't exist, because then they can't tell me, oh, that actually just says chicken fried rice. You messed up.
That's right. That's right. It's like that big tattoo that says "no regrets," but they've misspelt it, and it says "no regrets."
Yeah,
no
regrets.
Yeah, the biggest ironic tattoo you've ever seen. So we're going to talk about NLP. We're going to talk about persuasion. We're going to talk about influence. And we're going to break it down, I understand, into 5 different key ingredients. Where do you want to start, Jason?
Well, might as well start with NLP being neuro-linguistic programming. We'll start with what's known as linguistic presuppositions, right? So if your goal, I know it's a lot of big fancy words, right?
Sorry, I'm going to say it again. Linguistic presuppositions.
Yeah. So if you
that's how to get someone really interested on a hot date. And let's talk about linguistic presuppositions.
Exactly. It sounds like you're ordering something at an Italian restaurant. It's not linguini, but if you break it down, right? Linguistic, obviously meaning language, and then presuppositions is essentially assumptions in our language, the hidden assumptions that our language kind of gives meaning to. It's when we speak, and especially when people that aren't aware of this speak, their unconscious language choices that they make give you a lot of indication as to what's going on inside their mind. So as the name would suggest, from neuro-linguistic programming, language is a big part of what we look at, and it's a big part of what I look at in our courses and what we do. So the 2 key presuppositions, or the things that we're assuming within our language that create meaning in a client's mind when you're going to sort of either convince them of something or associate meaning in their mind, are number 1 is cause and effect, right? And this comes from the use of the word because, more often than not, and then complex equivalence, which is essentially one thing means another thing, and it's used like the phrase would be means that. So a bit of an example, and something that we use a lot is, because you're listening to this podcast, that means that you're a driven entrepreneur, you're a business owner who's looking to take things to the next level. Now, that's not necessarily true, but of course it is, right? But because you're on this podcast, it means this. You're essentially telling the client what something means. And if you could be intentional with that language, we talk in, especially in sales, about things like feature, benefit, outcome, right? You want to talk about the feature, then the benefit, the outcome. It really helps you move through that process by saying, as part of the program, we have this, which means that you'll learn this, which allows you to do this, right? And then you can really lead them on that journey of creating and shaping meaning of what you're saying, if that makes sense.
I've always known that the word because was a super powerful word. And I remember there was a study somewhere where they got a whole bunch of people, lining up to use a photocopier. And in the study, 1977, I think the study was, they refer to it as a Xerox machine. It's not a photocopier, it's a Xerox machine. And I think it was conducted at a university library, and there was all these people waiting to line up to use the Xerox machine. And an actor would come up and they would say, "Can I cut in because I only have 5 pieces of paper to photocopy?" And surprisingly, it was something like, 96% of people let them cut in. If they walked up and they said, "Can I just cut in? Can I cut in?" It dropped to something like 54%. But if they said, "Can I cut in because I have some photocopying to do," it was still like 92%.
Yeah. Humans are meaning-making machines, and if you give them the ability to create meaning and you help sort of push that meaning along, it goes a long way to getting, as you say, to getting agreement. But that's nuts. That's like someone with a full shopping trolley coming behind you, say, "Can I cut in? I have some because I have some shopping to do.
Because I have some shopping to do.
I have some shopping in this cart." Oh, of course.
Of course, yeah. But it was crazy. So it was like something like 96% of people, because people are generally polite in the first situation, because I'm in a hurry, let them in. And then 54% or 60% still let them in, even though they didn't have a reason, but they said, "Because I've got some photocopying to do." And then suddenly it was 92%, something like that. So the purpose of these linguistic presuppositions is it about taking someone on a thought path where we're linking two concepts together in their head?
Yeah, we're helping shape meaning and create meaning. And because without that meaning, humans are very, very bad at linking the dots. And their mind can wander off in many different directions. So you can really help funnel their thoughts towards a certain outcome or towards a certain path. Because you're on this call, it means that you're ready to take action. It means that you're looking to invest in yourself. You're looking to become better, all of that kind of stuff. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, no, that even if those are things that were true, if you ask them to think about it, you're driving them towards that thought pattern." And I even just thought of the opposite of that, right? Imagine, I don't know if you've been in this situation before where you've been out in a social event and you've chosen not to drink. If someone was like, "Hey, you want a drink?" and you were just to say no, people wouldn't take that very well. They wouldn't be able to just sit with that. And it's part of, obviously, Australian culture is a big part of that, but also they expect an explanation. "Oh, why? Is it because you're watching your health? Is it because you're driving tonight?" They always want an explanation why. So humans don't deal with what they call open loops very well. They like to have loops closed. They like to have meaning and they like things to come full circle. If they don't, it's a very uncomfortable place. And we talk about this in coaching and NLP as well, is making sure that you close the loops for the client by the time you jump off the call, so that they feel more comfortable, essentially.
And I'm gonna give an example of that before we move on to number 2. But I know that when I'm running a webinar, for example, in about the first 10 minutes, I will announce why I'm hosting the webinar. So I will say, I'm doing it for our existing clients. I'm doing it to educate new people. And a little bit later, I might have a product that I'm going to introduce you to. And if anyone wants to continue working with us, this is an opportunity to be able to do that. And I noticed that when I didn't do that, people were very uncomfortable because they didn't know what the intended quid pro quo was. Why is he doing this? And if I'm saying, because a little bit later, I'm going to pitch you like a mofo, they go, "Oh, phew. Now I know what the trade-off here is, and I can relax," which is funny because it's counterintuitive, because people will say, "Oh yeah, I don't want to scare people away by introducing something that I might want to do later." Like at the beginning of a sales call, we always make sure in the first 10 minutes, we say, "And a little bit later, if we think we can help you, I'm going to introduce you to one of our products and services. Are you cool with that?" And about 1 in 1,000 says, "No, I'm not cool." and then the other 999 people say, oh, phew, that's so good. So a couple of things there. One, cause and effect. People are looking for cause and effect. Use the word because. If you want to take someone on a path for them to create meaning around complex equivalence. If you're doing that, that usually means that. And people don't like open loops. So let's try and close those loops. So number one was linguistic presuppositions, a great thing to know about. And we've got some great examples there. What's number two?
Number two we've got is very similar to what you've talked about so far, is framing and reframing. So what we would, in NLP, what we would consider what you've talked about there with giving them an upfront idea of what to expect, we would consider that to be framing. Right? So you're setting the perspective of the client or the prospective client to see what you want them to see and to give them the frames to see it in the most effective way, depending on what it is that you're doing. So framing is the intentional setting of a frame when they don't have any context, right? It's like, hey, just to frame this conversation out, what we're going to talk about is X, Y, and Z. And then at the end of that, if we can help you move forward, we're going to talk about this. Is that okay? Right? You're framing the content of what you're going to be discussing. Reframing is when someone already has a set perspective and you help them to see it from a slightly different perspective. So you're taking an existing perspective and moving it and shifting it so that it takes on board a different meaning. A lot of this is about helping clients and helping prospects shift the meaning that they've associated to things. Because as human beings, think about the age-old question, what is the meaning of life? We're constantly searching and looking for meaning. And if we can help shift and influence the way that people see things, then that influences the outcome.
So I'm going to give two examples here. Once again, it's a sales call. You jump on the sales call and you say, here's what we're going to do today. And I have an agenda. And this is the agenda that we're going to do. So we're intentionally adding context, and that puts people at ease. There is also a more subtle layer of framing in that, because if I say, hey, Jason, we're about to sit down, we're going to run through a process together, I have an agenda or a structure, I am very subtly framing myself as the leader of that conversation and the authority and the boss. I don't know if that's framing or reframing.
That is 100% framing, and it's so accurate, because as the salesperson or the person who's leading that you are leading that conversation, right? They're coming to you looking for your service. So it's like, hey, it's not their sales process to run, it's yours. So especially when you're in business, you have to be the one to take charge and to say, hey, this is the path we're going on, because it's unfamiliar territory for them. They don't know what the next steps are to work with you if they want to. You have to lead them on that journey. And if you don't frame what's coming up, then they're just going to be like lost kids in the wilderness. Well, all right, well, what's next?
I love it when a business, particularly a knowledge professional, like it might be an agency owner, it might be a coach, when they have a methodology or a process, you can just see clients' eyes light up. There are other people that say, I'm going to come into your business. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to provide you with growth solutions. In fact, I have transformational services, and people immediately, you can see their resistance. But if someone comes in and says, okay, I've got this particular process, and we're going to tackle this challenge, followed by this challenge, followed by this challenge, because that is the logical sequence to solve those problems. People go, oh yeah, wow, I can totally see the methodology or the process that you have here. And then they relax and they breathe out. Very persuasive.
Yeah. So that's the idea of framing, and reframing is then they've got a set perspective already on something. They have already associated meaning. And our goal is to then help them shift it to a more helpful perspective. Let's say, for example, a lot of times as humans, we can't see the forest for the trees, right? We're stuck in our own little bubble. In NLP, we'd call it the map of reality, right? We've all got our own individual little map that we think is the right one, the only one. And sometimes we can't see different perspectives. And that's the goal of a good coach and a good salesperson, is to help them see a different perspective. It's like, it's kind of like another way to talk about objection handling, but in a more soft way.
I'm immediately thinking of things that we do. I've never done any NLP training, just so that everybody knows. I've picked up lots of bits and pieces throughout my life, because I've come off stages at an event and someone said, hey, you should have tried this. Or I'm about to jump on a stage and someone said, do you want to do that? So I have some ideas in my head about some of the things that we do when we're reframing. But what are some of the strategies or tactics that you teach?
So there's two real contexts to this, right? There's the person who's looking to influence, potentially a sale, or then there's also trying to help someone actually let go or resolve an actual challenge going on in their life. Let's say you're dealing with a challenge at work, and one of your coworkers or employees is having issues with another one for whatever reason, right? And for context, I had a client call the other day, and she was struggling with her friend. It was a really good friend of hers, and she was struggling because her friend was asking her, "Hey, have you taken your medication? Like, are you staying on top of that?" Because she had a lot of mental health issues that were going on. And she was like, I don't know why she wouldn't leave me alone. And just like, I know what I'm doing, and she's not a professional. She shouldn't tell me what to do. And so my immediate response to that was, and this is a reframe, was, isn't it wonderful that she cares so much about you that even though she doesn't know anything about the space, she's asking and checking in on you in the best way that she knows how? And all of a sudden she's like, oh, I guess I didn't really think of it like that. And then the tension of that relationship then really just it went away. She's like, oh shit. And she'd realized she'd been ascribing meaning to someone else's actions. And this is a quote I almost live by, is we judge other people. I feel like I might have heard on Tim Ferriss at some point. There's like, we judge other people by their actions and we judge ourselves by our intentions. And so we're always taking other people's actions at face value, never considering, hey, what might be another intention of that behavior? Or the intention is just to, because she wants to piss me off, or because she wants to micromanage my life. Hang on, the intention might be because she wants to be a good friend, and her version of being a good friend is checking in on you. Same thing with a boss. Oh my God, I can't believe they're micromanaging me. Isn't it great that they just want you to succeed so much, and they want you to give you all the support that they can to make sure you have all the resources that you need to do your job well? Isn't that wonderful?
I like that line.
Yeah.
Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful?
Communicate to
and
them.
You totally flip something on its head.
Yeah. And then I guess the other context of that is, if you're, for example, in like a sales conversation, we have people who don't like to do some trainings because they're recorded online, and they're like, oh, I want to do stuff live. I'm like, well, you won't be able to do much in person, right? COVID happens, things happen, right? But I like to do things live. Like, awesome. Isn't it great that as a busy person, as a person with a life and plenty of stuff to do, especially as a business owner, that you have the ability to access these recordings at any point in time rather than have to bow to our schedule? You can mold them to your own, because life is unpredictable. You can't always make things live. Isn't that great?
Yeah, I love, so objection handling there's an art to objection handling, because not all objections are logical. Indeed, I believe the best way to handle objections is before you even having a conversation. So for example, if you could write a list of all the reasons why people don't want to buy from you or engage from you, in our world, we add them to messages in emails and videos that we send before we actually meet up. So if we have a sales call over the phone and somebody says that's a great one, I prefer to do stuff live online, and they've already watched a video that says, isn't it great that you can do this and watch this at your leisure? I have a line that I use, and I say, in my not so humble opinion, this is the most time-effective training structure. This is the most time-effective structure for training available to humans right now at this point in the evolution of history. And I take all the reasons why they don't want to jump on a webinar or consume something, and I break it down. But you can do that with every objection. You write down every objection and you flip it around.
100%.
I'll tell you another strategy, and you're going to tell me whether this is a good or a bad strategy. We call it breaking somebody's guessing machine. And it is a little bit, it's definitely not as friendly as isn't it wonderful? But what we do is we set up a situation where we know someone is going to provide a specific answer, and then we definitively prove them wrong. And you're getting a funny look from Jason. And we do that because often we know that they're hanging on to a destructive way of looking at the world. But we also know that when we break someone's guessing machine, and I'm talking about their brain, there is a moment afterwards where you have someone's complete and open, undivided attention. And I say open, undivided attention. And I'll give you an example. If I'm walking up a flight of stairs, my guessing machine is calibrating the distance between the steps. And then the 27th step is a little bit higher or lower than every other step. And what happens, when that happens, is my brain's been conditioned over those 25, 26 steps to know, this is what my brain is telling me what's going to happen next. So logically, the 27th step is going to be the same height, because that's what life has conditioned me to believe. And then it's a little bit higher, a little bit lower, and I trip. And I don't know if you've ever fallen up the last step of a stair because you thought there was one more step or there's one last step. There's this
out of body
moment,
experience.
there's this moment where we're like some primal ape on the savannah where we are just, all the adrenaline goes into our body and we're eyes wide open and we almost like freeze. And then at that point, I think anyone could tell you anything and you'd be open to it. Yeah. So that's what we sometimes do. And we don't do it in a mean way. And obviously it would be a terrible thing to do. But on a webinar, for example, we might pose a question and we say A or B. Everybody says A. And then we show them why A is wrong. And then we introduce the next thing.
Yeah.
Their eyes are wide open.
100%. I think it's it's a great strategy to, number one, you show yourself to be a bit more of an expert, especially when they're leading towards a certain answer. You're like, well, hey, the reason why it would be so powerful, obviously, to work with us because there's that word again, because we are able to help you see things from that different perspective. Now, if now that we've presented you with this evidence, can you see why that answer may not be the most effective? 100%. That's why it's valuable to have people in your corner that can help you see things from these different perspectives. So, I think it's a great strategy, and it's perfectly ethical. It's cheeky, but it's ethical. I like that. Cheeky but ethical is the line you want to walk.
Cheeky but ethical. All right. What's number 3?
Number 3 is all about metaphors. Metaphors, and I threw a bonus one in there around embedded commands. So
metaphors and embedded commands, right? Yeah.
So it's fun and games. So metaphors, we've all probably used the word metaphor improperly before, but the definition in an NLP sense is that it's an unconscious story to lead a client or lead a person to an aha moment, right? So it's not an analogy is you're directly comparing two things. So, your business, it's just like a soccer team. Sometimes you need more people on offense. Sometimes you need more people on defense, right? It's you can still win 6-5 or you can win 1-0. It's still a 1-point game, but you want to be more offensive, right? Then you're directly relating two concepts. A metaphor is, let's say, for example, you've spoken to me about not wanting to invest in your business, not wanting to invest in your invest in a coach because you're doing things fine, you're getting along just fine. I'll be like, look, completely understand. It's not for everybody. Sorry, my laptop's just freezing a little bit. I need to feel like I had this conversation a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine where I was telling him about my laptop and it was just going super slow and it wasn't working properly. And he was like, why don't you get a new one? I was like, well, I don't really need a new one. Like this one still gets the job done. At the time I was a video exporter. I was doing a lot of videography stuff. And it was like, it takes ages to export a video. But I mean, like, look, I just do that. Then I go hang out, play some video games, sword fight in the backyard with my elvish friends. That's what I do. But it's fine. It does the job. It does the job it's needed to. Why do I need to upgrade? Why do I need to invest in it? And then he showed me his laptop and he exported a video in about a third of the time that it took mine to. And I was like, oh shit. I realized, I was like, I need to invest in myself. I need to invest in my laptop. And if I don't, I'm losing like 66% more productivity. But just because something got the job done doesn't mean it couldn't be done more effectively and efficiently. And it's not about the investment in the laptop. It's about what does that allow me to do with the rest of my time? And all it took was just someone else to tell me, hey, you need to make this investment, right? But I don't know what that has to do with business. I was just talking about my laptop shitting itself, right? But obviously that's a little bit on the nose because we just started talking about metaphors. But the idea being, what is the aha moment or the realization I want a client or someone to make? And we've all heard the phrase, facts tell, stories sell. Tony Robbins says this all the time. If I want you to think about your dad, I talk about my dad, right? If I want you to think about your investments, I talk about my investments, right? That's the story that you want to tell to lead them to a certain aha moment. Oh, wow, investing in yourself is more than just the money you spend. It frees you up in other ways. Oh, I didn't think of it like that. Oh, I didn't know where you got that from. I was just talking about laptops.
So an analogy is far more blunt. So analogy is you might say, you're like as you gave the football team, you're like a member of the football team and you're going to be playing offense or defense. That there would be an analogy. A metaphor would be, I was hanging out with my mentor the other day from 10 years ago and he reminded me of something that he said. So I had a mentor and he once said to me, James, do you want to know how to win an AFL premiership? And he told me this story, and he drew a little bit of a triangle on a piece of paper, and he broke it down into flair and fundamentals and all this other stuff. And he was just telling me that story. I now tell that story on webinars because I know that there is a point when I flip that triangle and everyone in the room goes, ooh, because it's also one of those brain breaking machines, one of those guessing machine breaking machines. I'm not sure whether that sits the line between an analogy or an unconscious story to an aha moment. But I think it definitely is. When I tell that story, there are people on the call that are obviously relating it to themselves.
So obviously the goal is to make it as unconscious as possible, but there's always going to be people that make the connection, and your goal is for them to make the connection themselves. So they're going to be watching, going, oh my God, yeah, this relates to my business. But you're not saying, hey, see this this premiership thing? It's like your business, right? You're telling them with an analogy.
That's it. That's it.
Exactly like, hey, for example, it's like, if your laptop broke down, you wouldn't think twice about spending money on getting it fixed, right? So why don't you do the same with your business? It's like you're telling you, then they're like, oh yeah, okay, I understand that, but it's less inceptive. It's less like inception, and it's more it's a directive. You're telling them what they should do and what they should think, which is useful if you're able to understand what some of their some of their interests are, right? It's like, if you have an idea of what they like, you can relate the two things, and they're like, oh, I get this concept a lot better now because you've related it to something I'm familiar with, right? Analogies are great for explaining things and getting people to a point of understanding. Metaphors, it's more so having them have these realizations.
It's the unconscious piece. It's so funny. You say, not everyone will come on board. So I was doing a webinar. This is only like 2 weeks ago, and I was telling a story. And this guy called Louis, I hope he's listening to this, he says, he leaves in the comments, don't tell this story next time, you sound full of shit, right? And then a woman called Bridget goes, what? No, I love this story. Leave it in next time. So it was, I got to say, it was a bit ham-fisted. I'd never told that story before. So anyway, metaphors, what's an embedded command?
So I did it a little bit in that story, but embedded command is understanding tonality, right? And I know there's an old, whenever you think, if you Googled NLP, one of the top ones that would come up would probably be, I was going to say Jordan Peterson. I can't remember his name now. What's his name? The Wolf of Wall Street?
Jordan Belfort.
Belfort, still a Jordan.
Who I met, by the
50%
way.
50% of the way there.
I interviewed him about 10 years ago, 2008. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what he said in my interview with Jordan Belfort a little bit later if we have the time.
100%. So yeah, I remember there's a specific clip of him talking about NLP, and he's like tonality, and he's like being real deliberate with his tonality. And there's a lot of fluff that people will sell you about NLP and how you can use it to manipulate and all that kind of stuff. But when you're thinking about embedded commands, there's essentially 3 ways our tone can be. It can either go up, like as a question, like you're a Valley girl from California and you always talk like this, and right, no one's going to really take what you say as an authority because your tonality is constantly in questioning mode. So you're constantly asking open-ended questions like this, like, does that make sense? Like you're actually genuinely asking a question. And it's useful when you are genuinely asking a question and want a response. But when you're trying to deliver something with a bit of meaning and you're just getting a question for a bit of response, for example, like if you're checking in with someone, say, hey, does that make sense? Like, it's not, does that make sense? It's, this is what you need to do. Does that make sense? Like, do you understand me? Rather than, hey, I'm open for questioning. So using embedded commands and using more downward or command tonality will allow you to seem and feel more authoritative when you're speaking. So clients don't leave thinking, oh, that guy was full of shit, right?
Yeah.
No, he was an authority. He spoke with downward inflection tonality. They don't walk away thinking that, but that is what is triggered in the mind more often than not, right? And all you've got to do is spend 3 minutes talking like this on the phone with someone. And do you think that's good? Do you think that'll work for you in your business? Like, I'm asking for your approval.
And by the way, Australians talk like this a lot. I watched a video not so long ago on LinkedIn. I opted in for a free gift. There was a video and the guy was trying to convince me to have a strategy call with him. And the whole way through, he was upwards the whole way through. And I thought Australians are going to tolerate it. But if you tried to launch that into America, no one's going to tolerate it. No. Because we do have a lot of Australians, as well as Valley girls, have this upward. I also noticed newsreaders always go down. 21 people died in Kuala Lumpur today.
Exactly. They're always flat, right? Flat is a statement. So there's a difference with, there's the command, there's the statement, and then there's the question. If you're going flat, it's just a statement. My name is Jason. I teach NLP. This is what we do, right? However, in the story, I spoke a little bit about investing in yourself. And I dropped the tonality. And I thought to myself, I just need to invest in myself, right? I didn't think I need to invest in myself. No, I thought I need to invest in myself, right? So it's now it's not magic. It's not going to make people do things. However, it gets them thinking in that when you have a downward inflection upon something that you can then sort of take as a command. Hey, I just want you to get up, just go over there and can you shut the door? As opposed to, can you go over there and shut the door? Right? There's a level of authority that comes with it, and it gets people thinking more likely to do it, as long as you're not growling at them, but you are more authoritative, you are more commanding when you are intentional with your tone.
I can see why people get excited about this one, about the tonality, because it does seem very, I don't know, it seems a little bit more manipulative. What's number 4?
Number 4 is indeed a myth around NLP.
Okay.
Is that it is unethical, and that it's also hypnosis.
Yeah.
So a lot of people relate the two. When they hear NLP, they're like, oh, it's like, is it like, you hypnotize people and you can tell them what to do, and they're getting very sleepy, and not quite. You can't make them cluck like a chicken. You can't make them say, give their Visa or MasterCard. It doesn't work quite like that, as much as you'd like to. So that's it's not quite there. The biggest concept I can teach about NLP from someone who's never heard of it or has heard of it in those more unethical terms is it's not a done to process, it's a done with process.
Yeah. There's only one person who can close the deal, and it's not you.
Yeah.
It's the client. I said that I might mention Jordan Belfort's story, and it is funny because this is a guy that Hollywood made a movie out of, because he was not only breaking the laws, he was living a life that some people might consider eccentric to depraved. And he also went to jail. And I met him when he was out of jail and he was rebuilding his life. And you like this, Jason? He said, would you like to know how to get rich quick? Now I was trying to go down there or statement like, so I wasn't asking you. And Jason responded there by not responding. So that's right. That's good. By the way, so the tonality works. Do you want to know how to get rich quick? And I said, all right, this will be interesting. Tell me, Mr. Belfort, how do you get rich quick? And he said, you can do really shonky, unethical things, rip a whole bunch of people off, upset a whole bunch of people, make promises that you can't keep. Best case scenario, you'll lose a lot of friends, you'll damage your reputation. Worst case scenario, you might end up in jail or debt. That's one way to get rich quick. The other way is to work really hard for a long period of time. It doesn't have to be a long period of time, but it's when you get all the different ingredients in place, then you click his fingers. And when all the bits and pieces come together, that's when you get rich quick. That's the overnight success. And I thought that was a very humble, interesting story, because it does remove us away from that idea about NLP being hypnosis or unethical. He was teaching me a strategy, which in its way he was telling me a story about being ethical. He was using his powers for good rather than evil.
Yeah, I like that. And to touch on that is NLP is not, again, it's not manipulation, it's not coercion. And the reason why it's persuasion influence, as you said, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. But when it comes to NLP, it's not about any of that. It's simply understanding what language does the client speak and think in. And if you can at least speak to their language, you'll have a much better opportunity to, to bring them on board, to get on the same page and to really decide, hey, whether or not it's going to be a win-win for you guys. That's what really matters. And that's what NLP is all about. You're going to have a lot better time speaking someone's language than you are not, right? If anyone who's ever been to a foreign country knows that the native people generally prefer you at least attempting to speak their language rather than going, oh, does anyone here speak English? Right? It's like, you don't want to do that in France. You probably, because they hate them, you want to be like, oh, does anyone speak Australian? Right? You don't want to be related to I would go up to pretty girls and say, je m'appelle Australian. My name is Australian.
And they would always laugh.
Yeah, exactly. But that attempt to at least speak in someone's language is far more appreciated, and it creates more openness, which is what the final tip is about. Creates more openness than just going in saying, hey, this is the way I do things. It's my way or the highway kind of thing.
So let's round off on tip 4. And that was accept it or embrace it, that NLP is not hypnosis. It's not unethical. When I started selling for the first time for, myself, before I was selling things in my business or packages, I was selling myself. And I was very uncomfortable about that until one day somebody said to me, oh my goodness, Jason, am I about to do a metaphor? I might. Anyway, until one day somebody said to me, imagine that you're walking along the street and you came across a friend and you said, how are you? And they said, I've got a terrible migraine. And if I had a packet of Panadol or headache tablets in my back pocket, what kind of human would you be if you didn't say, I've got these tablets in my back pocket, you should have one? You'd be a next level a-hole if that was someone said, I've got a headache, and you went, oh, that's nice, and kept walking, despite the fact that you know that you've got a headache cure in your back pocket. There is an extension above that, and I found myself in this position where I'm in the life raft and I'm watching people drowning and bobbing in the water around me. And like you telling your story with the laptop, they say, I don't need help. And I'm watching the sharks nip at their feet, and I'm watching the water get higher and rougher, and I'm throwing out ropes and pointing the oar saying, climb on in. And in the past, I would know that when I did that, they would drown because I didn't have the skills, or at least the comforting words, to let them know that it was safe inside my boat. Jason, was that a metaphor or an analogy? I don't know.
More of an analogy because it was conscious. However, the way that you could pivot that to a metaphor would be really it's about really dissociating from the subject matter, right? Yeah. Really, really dissociating. So you're like, I remember a mentor of mine shared this story with me. It was actually about the Titanic, right? And you can obviously, there's an element of creative license, but there were people on the Titanic and people that were in the water that refused to get in the life raft. And there were people that were in the life rafts that were trying to throw, oars and get them to come in. But they after what had happened on the Titanic, they simply didn't trust that. They thought, oh, if I just float here, surely something will come along and rescue me. And the women and children were on the life raft first, and they didn't have the skills to actually get, like, they were throwing oars left, right, and center. They ended up losing oars, right? They frisbeed off the little, the tubes that they had, and they ended up not being able to rescue as many people as they could have, because the people in the life raft just didn't have the skills to get the people that were drowning in the water back on board, and that's why so many more people died than they should have. I remember my mentor telling me the story. I don't know what that has to do with business.
Yeah, cool. All right, number 5, openness. So where are we going with this?
So this is a concept that many people probably will have heard already, which is about rapport, matching, and mirroring, right? So to sum up rapport from a NLP perspective, it's an unconscious sense of familiarity with someone, feeling like, oh, I feel like I know this person, or I feel like this person and I are on the same wavelength. And we've all had interactions like that when, whether it's at a bar, moving at a gathering or something, you're like, oh, this person's like real. I feel like it's like a long lost, like a brother from another mother, right? Like that kind of feeling is what you want to develop with rapport. And this is one of the key things that I think salespeople try to use unethically, which doesn't usually end up working, usually bites them in the ass more often than not.
Yeah.
And is something you can really intentionally set. Like, if you know people who are like, oh, that person just seems to be friends with everyone, they're just great at building rapport and finding common ground more than anything. Now, if you don't know someone, how do you build common ground? Like, someone might come up to me and be like, oh, Jace, I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings too. And I'll be like, all right, sweet, you're on my good books already. That's an easy enough thing. But if you don't know anything about someone when you speak to them, you've got to go based off what you can see and what you can hear initially, which is essentially the words they use, the tonality, the speed, the body language that they hold. Those are the things you tend to focus on. And those of you who are watching on video might have noticed that when James was whispering and leaning in, I naturally leaned in to, number one, to hear him better, but also because he was leaning in, whispering, like, he's like, Jason, I'm about to do a metaphor. I naturally leaned in because we're in a state of rapport. And when you're in a state of rapport, you're able to lead people to certain destinations. You're able to lead people's emotional states, and you're able to sort of bring them on the same wavelength as yourself. To give my most commonly used example of building rapport is when for example, I might be calling some people, some clients or some prospective clients in our database. And when I'm having a conversation with them, based on how they answer the phone, they might answer the phone like, let's say their name is Sarah. Hello, this is Sarah. Yep. Hey, sorry, who are you calling from again? Right. And then I know I'm not going to say, hey, Sarah, Jason here from Wild Success. Really, really looking forward to speaking to you. Do you have a couple of minutes now for me to speak to you about I'm not going to approach that. I'm going to say, hey, Sarah, look, my name's Jason from Wild. Just a real quick question I had for you. I just had a couple of things I want to touch base on. Do you have a quick minute now? I've used the word quick twice because the speed that she's talking at, she's clearly would be frustrated if I was to jump on the phone and be like, hey, Sarah, really, really looking forward to speaking with you. I'm so glad you answered that's an instant break of rapport when we, as human beings, we appreciate things that are the same as us. We appreciate similarity because it tends to be safety, right? It's why genetics, we tend to look like our father so that the father gets more imprinted on the child. Like, oh, that looks like me. I want to take care of it because it's like, it's why tribes are formed, right? It's why, as a sad thing, racism exists. A lot of people don't like the things that are different to them. So if we can be as similar to them as possible without copying, and it's happened to me before where I've imitated a New Zealand accent whenever we've been over there, accidentally, I've accidentally done it, not out of mocking, but just out of being around people long enough.
Yeah.
You tend to pick up their mannerisms because you're in flow, you're in rapport. So the biggest tip I can give to people is note their speed and their tone when they answer the phone. And there are some people that will be naturally slower. So I'll be naturally slower and softer because my natural state is quite fast-paced and intense. So I'll scale it back a little bit. Like, hey, it's Jason from Wild. Do you have a couple of minutes? I just really want to run you through something we've got going on at the moment. And I'll be softer with it because they'll be more comfortable speaking to me if I sound like them.
In my career before starting a magazine, so if I go from being a B2B business trainer, owner, SaaS company, before that I was a magazine editor, before that I worked in PR, and I would need to pitch ideas to journalists. And I am thinking back to that particular time, and I was fairly successful at pitching ideas to journalists. And I think that probably the reason is because I sounded like a journalist. Yeah.
100%.
But I'm just going to highlight one piece. We're talking about finding common ground, building rapport. Jason used the expressions matching and mirroring. I talked about tribes. What I've noticed is that people are more likable, and I believe that we can engineer likability if we can find that common ground. Jason turned around and said, someone says that they're into Lord of the Rings, and then suddenly already they've earned some points. They've earned some points. You've noticed that you go to buy a car and you meet the car salesman, and the car salesman says, where are you from? And you say, Iowa. And they'll say, oh, my brother-in-law lives in Iowa. That there is unethical matching and mirroring or whatever it is. But however, if you can find that common ground really, really quickly, that's really useful. And I don't know if you ever saw the movie Zelig with Woody Allen. It's a very
Might have been before
old
my time.
mockumentary, but it's basically a guy that just can't help but become the people that he talks to.
Right. That would be a great study.
Within an hour, he's like pretty much exactly the same as that person. He grows beards and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it all comes actually down to his own insecurity. Lots of fun. Anywho, I think we need to wind up. So let's just recap some of the things that Jason has talked about. We learned about linguistic presuppositions. We learned about framing and reframing. We learned about metaphors and embedded commands. Jason debunked a myth that NLP is about hypnosis and getting people to do things that they don't want to do, like cluck like chickens. And we finished up talking about matching and mirroring and creating rapport. Any final words of wisdom or advice for anyone listening to this right now, Jason?
I mean, the biggest thing for me is, especially if you're in a sales role or in a business role where you're speaking to clients and people, is listening with the intent to understand, not the intent to respond.
Nice.
That sums up everything we've spoken about in terms of understanding whether it's what the client's aha moment needs to be, how you need to help them see things from a different perspective, what their perspective actually is, using presuppositions to create meaning that will be relevant for the client. All of that comes down to listening with the intent to actually understand where they're coming from, not the intent to, oh, cool, I can move on to the next step of my sales process now. That's not what it's about.
Yes, we are all in this to help. And if you're not in it to help, you're not going to last very long in business. Jason, and his crew at Wild Success are there to help. So if you ever want to learn anything about NLP or coaching or just being more persuasive or influential, make sure that you track down those guys and gals at Wild Success. Thank you so much, Jason.
No worries. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.